engagement in our institutional diversity, equity, advocacy, and leadership office. I'm having an interesting Monday morning because my allergies decided to start messing with me. So if you see me on mute, it's because I am sneezing ferociously over here. Thank you, Krystal.
hmm and so we are going to just be, we're kicking off, like, as you may know, like National Hazing Prevention Week. And so we appreciate you all coming on as we talk through, like, what is this National Hazing Prevention Week? And as it relates more to like a faculty and staff, and wanted to talk through some of those things with you all. And even talking about who can you report to if you hear something? What are some things to sort of consider if you're seeing something? And probably even some nuance of like talking a little bit, it's not in the slides, but some conversation as well around like, what does this even look like when we're talking like in the online platform in which we're sort of engaging in these COVID times. So to get us started, Ronnie and I will sort of be going back and forth. And so feel free if you've got some questions or anything. Nakia is in here hanging out with us, and she'll probably will field some questions just in case if we miss it. So Nakia, feel free to interrupt as you please if you want to do so. So it's not going to be nice. There we go. So just even getting started, we launched even last year of talking about the National Hazing Prevention Week and having some conversations and wanting to really start talking about these things here on the campus. And so sort of circling back to give like some context of where we have been. You may have known about this if you're sort of in the Pennsylvania area, of Timothy Piazza, a Penn State student who had passed away after pledging during participating in a ritual while pledging in a fraternity. And so while there's probably has been lots of conversations around hazing prevention prior to these things, this sort of like catapulted or served as a catalyst of what happens within the state and how we sort of have come to these new laws and how we are governing. So I do want to just highlight that this is not like something that is just occurred. These are things that have been happening, but this sort of catapulted the state to sort of take some more actions around hazing. So after that occurred in October of 2018, the governor signed the Timothy J. Piazza anti-hazing law. And so, and then in November, that law went into effect. And so essentially what a part of that was is even looking even through our K through 12 and secondary and post-secondary of how we're pushing through and how we are addressing this law is what has been taking effect. And part of that law also is having a hazing report. And we can talk about that as well and how that's housed on student conduct's page. But we have this hazing report so that there is a little bit more transparency as into what is happening on each campus within the Pennsylvania state system. So, and then also Piazza family came last year to talk to students. It was very, very impactful, and a lot of students took away from that. And we're thinking about not just within a fraternity and sorority, because that's not just where hazing occurs, but how this is even happening in different other spaces. So if you're thinking about like different bands, honor society, it's in different locations. And so it's sort of for us is in bringing us into today of thinking about how do we help and how do we acknowledge that this is something that could be happening on college campuses, and how do we help our students and faculty and staff, think about hazing and think it from in a different way or unlearn some things that we may know about it to try to change and shift our culture. So this
So,
is,
oh, you
go,
want me to,
go ahead.
nope, go for it. I was ready for you here. Okay. So thinking for a moment too about everything that Krystal just mentioned, right? We want to start off by sharing with you all the definition of how hazing is actually kind of defined out there. So it is defined as the person intentionally knowingly or recklessly for the purpose of initiating, admitting or affiliating a minor or student into or with an organization, or for the purpose of continuing on enhancing a minor or student's membership or status in an organization, causes, coerces, or forces a minor or student to engage, including activity adversely affecting the mental health or dignity of the individual, sleep deprivation, exclusion from social contact, or conduct that could result in extreme embarrassment or brutality of a sexual nature. That is, legal definitions are very always interesting because they're so bougie sounding, to say the least. And I would just say, uh, it's important to highlight from this that when a person is experiencing levels of hazing, they can do so in that first sentence. It talks about how it can be intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. So a person may not even know that hazing might be occurring, but the actions that subsequently are endured through that could be found as a responsible or liable type of situation as well. Krystal, did you have anything to add to that one?
No, I think that, well, I have a thought, but I was like, oh, it's going to be perfect when we go to the next one.
Okay.
Even adding with that is with the new law that has come into place that is inclusive like of the aggravated hazing and organizational hazing. And so with those two pieces, the aggravated is where this is seriously bodily injury or death to a minor or student. And then organization is like with the organization intentionally knowing or recklessly promoting or facilitating the hazing or aggravated hazing. And so this is sometimes where typically on college campuses, this is not always what we are experiencing. We experience more on the latter end. And the aggravated, and even in the hazing we see a lot, but the aggravated especially is more so like what may end up happening in the news or like these bigger things sort of cast this cloud over hazing. So one of the thoughts that we'll talk about is even like that tradition of how hazing sort of bumps up against tradition and how we manage that as well. So just keeping going and like what the law is saying, it's redefined how we look at hazing, and like we said, is inclusive now of aggravated hazing. And it has set these new guidelines for secondary and post-secondary institutions, and it has also applied these like certain penalties that can take place if found responsible, and then as well as there's protection for students or participants who speak up, because a lot of times what's happening is we have like a medical amnesty. I don't know, you've probably have heard on our campus. So we also have like a hazing amnesty as well. And so that's to protect students so that if they move forward or come forward or reporting, and then the university moves forward, that they are protected.
So, what would someone choose to be hazed? Is a very rhetorical type of question here, but they are doing so possibly because of this notion of solidarity. So being committed to an individual and or organization of individuals as well, having levels of loyalty or commitment, instrumental education, validation, this sense of belonging. For me, this is one of the biggest and critical piece. There's this notion that they want to be included, to fit in, to be belong to something. A lack of awareness, so that's the educational piece, and then social dominance. Mm-hmm.
The only thing I was also going to say, this is when we were talking, Rodney, is even thinking about tradition. And so that sometimes comes into play of why a person may choose to be hazed, in the sense of like, they may not even define it, what they're experiencing as hazing, but this is, other members have gone through this and I want to be a part, and I want to be able to share those stories. And so there's this part of tradition that also helps of why a person may choose to be hazed. And again, like they may not even name it as such, or what they're experiencing, how we would define it. We would say hazing, but they may not view it as that.
Yeah, and Crystal, that's a really important one too, right? Because there's that historical tradition where 20 plus years ago, this stuff may have not been defined as of hazing. So you might have members that have passed down these quote unquote traditions and said, I went through this and this is what has happened. But nowadays, most organizations, not most, all organizations have updated, to things to fall under this umbrella of hazing in order to ensure that members are not taken advantage of.
Right. Yeah. So we've got some potential signs of hazing, and we probably have seen these things. And I'm going to sort of try to hold the space, and you can use your icons or the reactions on the Zoom. So if you have experienced, or in terms of dealing with the student, have these been things that you have seen, or are there other things you've also seen as potential signs? Anything happening in the chat here before?
I don't see it yet.
Okay.
Oh, we do. Um, is it Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea, okay. Yes, so Andrea says sleep deprivation is one I have seen in our student employees. So, okay, thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Late nights and pillows go missing is something I was once told, which made me definitely want to come to this. So thanks for putting this on so I'm better educated at what to do when a student makes a comment about something that seems so absurd, but you realize, wait, you can't sleep if you don't have a pillow, and now your bedding's gone, and what do you do as a poor college student to get more bedding? So thank you for putting this on.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
I would also add like change in attire in general. So like our old boots being worn that like are having to be worn in like basement floors that like they don't traditionally wear those kinds of attire, that might just be that's different to that student, and it's noticeably something different. And kind of like tying one and one together to even just have that conversation of, hey, I'm noticing that this is different, and having the notion that there might be that conversation or tie in there.
For sure, yeah.
And I'll even add on to that as well, just changing behaviors too. If a student is like unpunctual, quite often, or their behaviors have changed and it's not something that they normally exhibit, sometimes that could link over to hazing. There are definitely some other scenarios that they can link into as well, but just thinking about some other additional signs.
So here, this is definitely not an all-inclusive, because as you mentioned, we've heard some other things. So, and I would also just add, as you're knowing students and engaging with them, there might be something interesting based on their personality that has shifted, that helps you realize that something could be going on. So these are just some sort of like some highlights of pieces that are potential signs. And I think the best thing is always asking some questions, doing some follow-ups, and sort of confronting that situation sort of privately, just to see where they are, and what's happening with them.
So you'll see here what is required of Temple University. Like many institutions, we've had to update the student code of conduct, updated the student organization constitution and bylaws to reflect some of this information, investigate all allegations that may come forward. Krystal mentioned earlier that on the student conduct website, you can see various types of things that have been alleged and or reported. And then hazing report published twice a year, and then hazing amnesty, which is a very important piece, right? So if I come forward, then there may not be any type of disciplinary things outside of educational purpose that may be inflicted on me. So it allows students to come into a very safe and brave environment to discuss these things with someone to provide help and assistance as needed.
And with the hazing report that's published twice a year, it's typically published right before the fall semester starts and right before the spring semester starts, is the two times. And so even though those are the two slated times, there may be moments where it needs to be updated or something has occurred, and so we have to make changes. And on that report, we maintain up to 5 years. So we're in 2020. So anything from all the way dating back to 2015. And then once we go into one, these things, some come off of those 5 years. And so if you are having to run peruse and you go on the student conduct page, and then if you go underneath the About Us, there is an icon that talks about statistics. And if you click on the statistics, you'll see the report. You can click on the report from there. But that's where we house it. And we put out a call across the university, requesting anything that has been heard. And for those who may not be on that email, you're always going to sort of just reach out to conduct or student activities and share anything, and those entities then be able to compile and to start an investigation to see like what information we need to collect and find out like what's going on, and proceed with whatever next steps in the process. So one of the things that we always hear is that, am I a mandatory reporter? Like what happens if a student does come to me? And as a faculty and as a staff member on our campus, you are a mandatory reporter. And those who are sort of more in the confidential, very similar to if this was like a Title IX situation, that would be with counselors, medical staff that holds that confidentiality. So something that, when students come in and they're talking, or if they start to share, sometimes I will very much pause them and say, I don't know if you remember, but I work in student conduct. And so if you share this with me, I am a mandatory reporter and I am going to have to do something with the information. And so if you're just hoping to be able to share to get this off your chest, I'm going to have to direct you somewhere else, because sharing with me, we're going to have to move it up the process or up the ladder in the process. And so being open and honest with students, and even sharing with them that if they do want to share and are comfortable, that there is hazing amnesty for them, if they decide that they want to do so. But wanting to be transparent and upfront so that should they report to you, they're not surprised that you then had to report that information to the entities of who would move forward in a process. So you are a mandatory reporter, and again, it's just more so that they can know, and then that's our ability to help as a community, that it's not just falling on certain offices, but that as a community we are taking a stance against this as a whole.
Krystal, did you want to? Oh, it kind of flowed for you to probably mention. Well, I can mention it. Surprise! All of our contact information, is up here if you ever need any type of like guidance, right? As it pertains to, student orgs and such that may be in place. The beauty of it being various types of individuals to report it to is because there are different clusters that students might feel comfortable with in coming forward with some of this information as well too. So definitely you all see all of our information up here. Please feel free to spread it and or reach out to us as needed.
So we talked about like the Temple Hazing report, and then there's also the hazingprevention.org, and we have a hazing prevention working group. Kia's on it, I am on it, Rodney's on it, and then we have quite a few other members who are on it as well, and it's sort of representing different offices across the campus and even within the Division of Student Affairs. And so if this is something that interests you and if you would love to participate, we would love to have your voice and your thoughts around the table with us as well. As our hope is that we're wanting to move just beyond even talking about it throughout the week. But even thinking about, are there things that we can create and put together that is ongoing, and sort of raising a lot more awareness around hazing prevention, and having us as an institution being a lot more proactive, and not just reacting when we have something coming in, but talking with our students, and getting them to think about their culture and what they are experiencing, and how can we create experiences where students feel a part and feel connected without that sense of power being loomed over them. So if it's something that you're interested in, we would love to have you. We absolutely would encourage you to think about it, to come hang out with us. We are really trying to put forth some good work, and so we would love that. So we're right at the end. We're probably like, wow, this was super quick. So wanted to get like your thoughts, or is there anything that you're thinking about, so that we can engage like in conversation?
I have one question. So when I think about our student employees or some of this, I don't think they realize sometimes the harm that might be happening to them as part of a group. Is there anyone on campus doing presentations like this to help educate students around like, hey, if this is happening to you, that's not normal? Or where would we go? When I think about our employees, we have, 50 of them together at once, and I think it would be great if they heard this type of content.
So yeah, so we do have things that we put on even within student activities that we also have something throughout this week, that will be for students as well. But something that, if that is an interest in terms of us talking with your student employees, we can definitely work together to do a presentation with them. So our contact information is up there. You can work with either Nakia, myself, or New Rodney, but we'd be more than happy to even do the same presentation and sort of tailor more towards students, and have some conversation, and talk about that. I feel like, Sydney, you're up this week. We're talking with students. Correct me if I am wrong.
Yes, I'll be talking this week with, I'll be doing a workshop for students on basically like healthy alternatives to community building. So not necessarily talking about what signs to look out for hazing, but kind of what are healthy things to replace hazing behaviors.
So Andrew, you can definitely reach out to us. We're more than happy where we can set something up and do like a training with your student staff.
Yeah, I think that would be great. One day we'll get back to some type of fun training, and we'd love to have you all. I think it would be great for them to hear this.
Andrea's question almost prompted me to think too that there's this myth that hazing only occurs within certain organizations, such as fraternities and sororities, athletics. Those are definitely some of the ones that we hear about quite often. But it also prompted me to things like, what about the student staff teams? What about
I know. I'm ready to be like, y'all better not be doing any of these things to one another that we don't know about. And if you are, we're coming for you.
It could. So no, and your point, definitely goes into context, Andrea, is that this can happen anywhere outside of any of those groups as well, too, as long as you have a group of students. And it's so funny because I remember when I was an RA, there were like almost like these ritual type of things back in the day that you had to do to kind of prove yourself and or what to do on the basis of tradition as well. So it's important to look out even when students are not going out to be an athlete or a fraternity member or sorority member as well. And band is another one of those big ones.
Yeah, I would also add that aspect of tradition might be a tradition for the person that came before them, but is not actually a lasting tradition for the organization or for the chapter or group in general. So they might think that it is a tradition when really, cool, you've done it for 2 years. And, having that notion of conversation too around like, what does tradition mean? And then I think often too, we combine sometimes in thought, hazing and bullying and understanding the difference between the two. Of hazing is inclusion. I want to include you in order to make you feel a type of way, where bullying is excluding you and doing that same kind of practice. So both are, issues within organizations, but understanding the difference can also be helpful in order to properly addressing hazing within organizations versus bullying activity that might also be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, not particularly a question, but things that I struggle or I'm trying to work towards are that I'm just one person who supports almost 500 student orgs, and I'm not in the most, like, I can talk to them about like responsibilities and things that are due and requirements and all of that, but for a student to come to me and explain like, hey, like, here's what my org is doing, like, I don't know if it's hazing or not, like, they're not really having those conversations with me. And like, I would hope and wish that they are. But most of the time it's just about like STARS workshops or something like that. And I think that what New Rodney and Matt both said about like, oh, hazing is for those groups. Like, we're not doing that. We're just doing like initiation night. That's the tradition. And yeah, it's really hard to be able to figure out a way to support so many groups at once without even knowing what's happening or having the relationships to ask the question. So it's something that I think like student activities needs to do a better job at overall, because our student orgs like certainly are a part of this narrative as well.
Question about you mentioned the hazing prevention work group, and I'm curious, so do you have representation on that from the health science campus? That's where I am, and I guess when you think about tradition or prove something to be part of this, that's somewhat built into the academic nature of a lot of the programs by us. And I know our office, which oversees the orgs, I can't say we do much on hazing, so I'm curious if part of that work group has any health science campus representation, or you don't see that connection as much.
I would say at this moment we don't have, but we would love to.
I would say, because we have about 150 orgs by us. Some of them are fraternal, some of them are student orgs. And I guess if I think about those students, I can certainly see that some of this might very well lead to hazing behaviors, because there is so much tradition and some elitism in a sense of you have to be good enough to be here already built into their academics. I'd be curious how that carries over to their student involvement as well. And I'm going to guess that it does if I had to make any assumptions.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. Andrea, I'm definitely going to reach out after this training just to certainly invite someone from your team or that person who oversees those orgs to join us in or future or this work group or future trainings. I don't think we do as good of a job at reaching health science campus for a lot of things, not just these types of convos. And I think that that's a population that we're likely missing. So that's definitely a great, so now what for us.
Yeah, if you want to send a blurb of kind of what you all do or what the group looks like, because by us, our office does a lot of the logistics behind stuff and we do programs for the whole campus, but a lot of the student orgs, their closest relationship is with each, like the med school is a student affairs group, the pharmacy school is a student affairs group, so they're very siloed and different. So I'd be happy to, if you send me an email with that, either forward it out to those people and copy you in on it and see if you get any interest from the folks who I would say have the closest relationship with those orgs. And Kara, who was on our team and did the student orgs, just left for a different job. So we kind of have a gap there, but I think you could reach some folks who work with those student orgs every day within their own schools.
Perfect.
Yeah, send me a note.
I absolutely will. I think to Sydney's point around, what, for those of us who work directly with students, what more could we be doing this year in general? I think we've done a lot more with advisors, faculty staff advisors, because they're critical for us reaching the mass of students that we need to. But Andrea brings up a really great point around, how many more students, right, that aren't necessarily just connected to main campus, but also aren't connected to a student organization, right? How do we get more eyes and more knowledge out there so that between staff and advisors and students, we're picking up on these signs and can have these proactive conversations versus us just versus us waiting for it to get bad enough that we happen to get a report. I think we have some really curious faculty and staff that oftentimes are like, this just feels odd. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to report it because I don't know what it is and I can't call it. But if we can get our student staff up to speed, if we can get faculty, staff, advisors up to speed, I think that we know a lot more about what's going on and can put our brains together as far as how to address it proactively or address it as incidents occur.
I agree with you, Nikki. I think something that Sydney, as you were talking, that came to mind was even us having a discussion with our students. I think I see this a lot, just even in like our code of how we define things may not be necessarily how students define things. And so I think because of that, we end up in a disconnect sometimes. So even for us within the group and just as administrators, faculty, and or staff, thinking of like, how do we work through of understanding the students' definition of how they may be defining hazing? Because they may read that and say, "Oh, well, that's extreme. That's not happening," and they view this is how we may see it, and so how we can then bridge that gap is something I think is always going to be taking time, even as we're like working through the culture and understanding the students more and more, and getting their buy-in is starting with that too. Is I want to understand how you view it, how you approach it, and how you're thinking about your rituals or things that you want to make sure that whoever is being a part of you gets this perspective or understanding on. So as we come down towards like final pieces, final thoughts before closing out, is there any last minute questions or comments or thoughts that you all may have? What it looks like the consensus is no. So I do want to say thank you all for coming to hang out with us today and kicking off this week. Rodney and I really appreciate it, and the prevention work group really appreciates it. And so you saw our contact information. I'll go back. So definitely feel free to contact us if you do have any questions or anything. And if you are interested in wanting to be a part of the work group, you can reach us and we will make sure you're in contact with Nakia, who holds all the information for us at the moment. So we thank you and we appreciate you taking some time out today to chat with us.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Bye.